Hey everybody, welcome to three, four, third, I think. That's like the third or fourth live stream we have going on. Today we're going to work on some soldering, and I'm going to try to show you guys some tips and tricks for that. I have a pretty cool Warlock, just a really unique guitar. I've never seen one like it, probably never will again. It's one they kind of made as a prototype kind of thing, even slapped a USA custom plate on the back of it and everything too. And the guy that bought it says everything on it's still original. Trustworthy source. I have no reason not to believe them. So it looks like something that they were looking at putting out quite a bit. Really unique color. Just a really cool guitar, but it's been sitting for a really long time and it's going to need a bunch of new electronics. We're going to use the same pickups that are in there, but what I'm going to do today is wire up the output jack, wire up the um, bridge volume, the neck volume, the tone pot, and the switch to get ready to be put in the guitar. And while I'm doing that, I figured I'd just walk through some things and kind of explain some stuff to you guys. When I'm wiring guitars, I always keep a wiring diagram in front of me, so I'll be looking at that periodically if you see me look off the screen, or I'm looking at myself or the chat or whatever's going on. So when you do arrive, please say hi. Love to hear from you guys. If you got ideas for future streams and stuff like that, please let me know. I'm always looking for ideas because honestly, most of the time I'm like, hey, I'm streaming tonight. What am I going to do? And about an hour and a half before the stream, I say, well, this guitar needs this done. Let's do it. So that's what we've been doing lately for streams. Yeah, hope hope this turns out all right. We haven't tested the cameras, but the cameras have been working pretty darn well. So I think we're not going to have any issues. I'm going to fire up my soldering iron real quick here. Um, just a couple things about soldering just to go over real quick. The type of solder that you use is very, very important. I use this Kester solder. It is 60% tin, 40% lead, and is rosin core. The rosin core is super important because that allows me to get solder points started on pots and things like that. A lot of people have a lot of issues soldering pots and stuff like that, and it's usually because they don't have that rosin core. There's nothing there to stick to the metal. That's very, very important. When I use my wires and stuff, I have kind of a whole bunch here, but I pull a bunch out of my circle coil here. I like the wax covered cloth wires. They're vintagey, but they're very durable. They fold nicely, they bend nicely, and they peel back very easily as well to solder stuff on, so you're not always having to use crimpers. Um, that's fantastic. When I do use crimpers, um, somebody ruined that pair. Um, I do actually get these from StewMac, and they're just really fantastic and very sharp. The best part about it is they cut in small enough gauges for stuff that I'm doing, whereas if I go to like Home Depot or Lowe's, these crimpers aren't always around the smaller gauge ones, and it's usually for like electricians doing house wiring and stuff like that. Um, yeah, the largest gauge on here is 20. So if that tells you anything, these are fantastic for that purpose. Um, Also very sharp, and they hold their sharpness for a long time, which is great. We'll cut through the cloth and cut through the wax and stuff without any issues either. Lastly, get yourself a really good soldering iron. If it is able to show you the temperature you're at, it's even better. So I set my soldering iron for around 530 degrees. Um, the one that I purchased tells me it's 585 degrees on the actual device itself, but when I check the temperature of the tip, it's only 530 degrees. So 585 would be probably a little too hot. I'd be a little concerned about soldering at 585 degrees and damaging components and stuff like that. So, anyways, other than that, I'm sure some of you have wanted to or already have already started soldering stuff, especially for changing pickups. An output jack goes bad, you need to change out a pot real quick. Soldering isn't that difficult, especially if you have the proper tools and you have a solid soldering iron. So, what we're going to do is just start soldering up this piece and go from there. So, let's do a top down right away, please. So, presume you have to change the scene though, bud. There we go. All right, so laid out here, um, I have everything I need for this guitar, and the guitar goes in the order of it's right in a line, and it goes the neck volume, the switch, the bridge volume, then the tone, and then the outputs on the side. So I didn't have anything that lined that up right across like that, so I have these labeled. So we're going neck volume, switch, bridge volume, tone, and output. So we're still going to kind of go in a line here, leaving a little bit of slack between the two. These are about this right distance apart from every single thing, but well, let's say we wire a switch backwards. We want to be able to just flip that around rather than have to desolder it and resolder it and stuff like that. So we want to leave a little bit of slack where we have a little bit of wiggle room. Nothing else is going in that compartment. It's a pretty big cavity. We don't have to worry about there being too much wire or anything like that. As far as the pickups go, they're pretty straightforward pickups. There's a ground, there's a lead, and then there's also a ground wire coming from the bridge. That's going to be on every guitar. Some humbuckers might actually have um, 5 different wires coming off of them. And that's going to allow you to do some split coil stuff, or there's a lot of different things you can do with those wires. I'm not going to get into that stuff right now. That's more advanced. My whole purpose is to kind of show you guys how to get nice solder joints, get shiny solder joints, and kind of do the right thing. So, prepping for putting the pots in the guitar is also a big thing too. So that's also a really important aspect of soldering as well. So right away, we know we're going to need to solder in our jack. So we can start with that. On this particular layout, what we're going to actually have is our middle part of our switch right here is going to go to this lug on our tone pot, and then off our tone pot, we're going to the output here. So the tone pot is the last thing that any of this stuff goes through. The pickups go directly to here. Then they come out these into the switch, out the switch into the tone pot, out the tone pot into the output jack, out the output jack into your amplifier or pedal board or whatever you're plugging into. So that's the order we're kind of going in. I'm just going to kind of start working my way backwards, and we're going to show you how we have to ground some things and stuff like that, and just show some tips and tricks here. So you always want a clean tip. As you see, I got this copper wire here. I'm going to clean my tip off. It's nice and shiny now, and also nice and hot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little solder on there. Just tin that a bit. And I am now going to heat up the component I want to solder and get some solder going on that. Now I'm not going to put this on here and then use the soldering iron. I'm actually touching the component with the solder. And I'm just getting solder on this, getting ready for me to put wires on. So those two parts are done. We have our output jack, which has this middle sleeve part here. That's our ground. And then the tip is off to the edge. That one's going to be our active wire. So we're going to solder our active wire on there first. So that's going to go from here to here. And then remember, we also have to go then from here to here. So I'm going to use white wire for that. Cut off a chunk. And I'm going to measure about here to here. Give it a little bit of extra, and we'll call it good. I'm actually going to go a little overboard on this one. So remember I said this wire pushes back nice and easily. That's what we're going to do. We're going to push it back a little bit right there. Now I'm going to put a little solder on my iron, and then I'm going to just tin the tip of this wire with that solder. So that allows this wire to heat up very quickly. Now this is our lead, like we said. The sleeve is the ground, the tip is the lead. We're going to heat up the component. We already have solder on there. We're going to stick it through there, then we're going to hold it still. Once I'm confident that's dried, I can let go. Now it's going to be tough to kind of zoom in on this, but it is a nice shiny spot on there. That's what we want. When the solder's shiny, that means it dried correctly. We don't blow on it to dry it, and we don't. Yeah, the biggest thing is to not blow on it to dry it. So proper wetting. Yeah, I've never, literally never. I used to have a wet sponge next to me all the time. I just don't ever have a need for it, and my tips last longer when I'm not using it, and I always get good joints, and I don't have any issues without that little wet sponge next to me. So I just use the copper to clean it off, and I don't have issues with any wetting of the tip. So I know I don't know, everyone's got their own thing. That's a big no-no. Like for me, I've, again, never had issues with that. To each their own, I guess. Some people don't use the copper at all. They only use a sponge as well. And to me, that's even weirder. So, in fact, I think most of the people I've seen on YouTube were only using a sponge. So, which was very, very weird to me. I'm going to cut off another long wire here. We need to go to this middle input jack right here. Or I'm sorry, input jack. We need to go to the middle lug on our switch. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to do that one first. And the reason why is because we have two connections here on this first lug, and we want to be able to put them both on at the same time and solder that rather than trying to do a bunch or do one and then do the other. So if we put these both in here, it's fantastic. Um, Now, I showed you about tinning the wire and all that stuff too. Again, that's just kind of the same thing with the proper wetting. Is it something you're supposed to do? Yeah, but if you're soldering well and you have a steady hand, there's really no need to do that. And if you're wondering what I'm doing right now, I just had a tiny little bit of extra wire hanging off the tip there that I'm just going to cut off. Um, so for me, if I can put both of these in here and then solder these both on here like that without having to pre-tin anything or anything like that, I'll go ahead and do it. And I know those connections will be strong. It's going to be a nice shiny solder joint, and I'm not going to have to worry about that at all. Um, but I wanted to show the proper way to do it as well with making sure you tin everything and stuff like that. Um, can we get the front view now? So perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to see. So if we see here, we see how small this hole is to get this wire through. Now, if I go ahead and I tin this and I put solder on that, that means that hole's covered up. And if I want to push this string through to solder it properly, it's going to be much easier if I have the string in there now than if I do it afterward. So for me to tin this and stuff, is that the proper technique? Yes, but I mean, this is such a small component, and it's gonna the solder's gonna take no time at all to get hot on such a little bit that we shouldn't have to do any of that. So we did it proper technique once. I clean my tip off. I put some solder on the tip. I'm gonna touch my component. I'm gonna put solder on there. I'm gonna take it off. It's already gonna stay still for me because it's not moving. And it's a nice shiny joint, and I don't have to worry about anything. Let's get this. And we have a nice shiny solder joint, just like that. And it's not going anywhere. I can pull on this, and I don't have to worry about that going anywhere. I didn't have to wet anything. I didn't have to pre-tin anything or anything like that. Again, is that like practice that a lot of people show? No. Is that something that you see on YouTube a lot? No. I don't know. Been wiring guitars up for years now doing this, and I've never had issues with it. So I'm going to show you guys this one more time. This time in a much bigger fashion because we have this big lug with two wires on it. And here we are again. So it's a shiny joint. I don't have any issues. Nothing's coming off. It's a nice solid connection, and I really don't have to worry about it. Um, so I don't know if you guys hate that or you have a reason why that should not be happening. Let me know. Maybe you know something I don't know. I am much better at carving a guitar body out than I am at fixing amplifiers and things like that. So as far as my soldering goes, this is as far as I go. I don't do anything after soldering pickups and stuff like that. Very simple stuff. I'm not repairing amplifiers and working on circuit boards and things like that, which is where, as far as my understanding goes, that stuff matters a lot more. So, another big thing I wanted to show you was how to kind of get a nice ground spot going on the top of your pot. So, if we go back to that top view here, one thing I'm going to have to do is put a capacitor on this right here. So, if I grab my capacitor, I'm going to go ahead and this is one that I would actually put solder on simply because I'm going to use my hand to put the capacitor in here. So switch hands here, make it easier. I like soldering left-handed, but for the camera's sake, I will. If you're wondering, this is a 0.22. So your capacitor is what's helping you roll that brightness off your tone on your tone pots. If you had two tone pots, you would need two capacitors, one for each one. Most of the time, they are soldered to this middle pot and then to the pot itself, or sometimes they will go from the middle pot up to a volume pot. You'll see that in a lot of Les Paul style things. So I'm going to slide this guy out of the way because I want to show you how to put a nice ground spot. What I'm going to do is actually use this spot to ground both the jack and this capacitor at the same time. So use a wet sponge. So yeah, the temperature controlled iron is like a must for me. I literally won't solder without one. Um, I remember years ago trying to solder with one of those cheap, like $15 local hardware store irons, and it was just the worst. I couldn't, man, I can never go back to not having a nice temperature controlled iron. So, but yeah, the wet sponge was something I tried for a while, and I really like just running it through this copper bush here, whatever you want to call it. And also, what I do, so this is a brass tip cleaner with rosin flux reservoir in there. So, and I have a lot of these like in bags to replace. So I flip them over a few times, and eventually they get so dirty that I replace them with another one. So, um, I don't know. They clean the tip of the iron very, very well, and I never have to use a wet sponge. So, but back to this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a lot more solder than I normally put on my iron. Don't inhale this smoke. It's awful for you. I'm going to put my iron down where I want that to start, and then I'm going to add solder to the bottom of this to create that point right there. So the clear stuff you see on the side here, hopefully you can see that, kind of. That's the rosin, and obviously we have the solder on top. Let's get our ground going from our output jack. Just pull the cloth back a little bit. Obviously, if you had rubber coated wire, we would be crimping all of these, but with the cloth wire, we don't have to worry about that. In the tip, nice and shiny. Get us some solder on there without breathing it in. I go ahead and rotate this to make it easier for me to do. Touch the component. There we go. And I usually push that wire cloth right back up to the joint that it was on. All right, so this one's going to go right over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stack these on top of each other. So now these are laying side by side with one another. And another reason why I really like this cloth wire is I can kind of bend it however I want. So now I'm not even touching it. And can we go back to the front camera, Ev? Thank you. So now I'm not touching it, but it's actually resting on there for me. So we have this still slightly warm solder underneath, and I'm going to take advantage of that being slightly warm right away. I'm going to load this bad boy up with solder. I'm trying to get an angle that you guys can see it. And hopefully this works. I'm going to hold this wire down. It's not going anywhere. I can pull on both of these, and that's soldered on there, and I don't have to worry about it. I am going to, can we go back up to the top? Sorry, bud. Thank you. Um, Now you will see that I left space on the side of here. On this side, that was intentional because we're going to have to ground from here to here, here to here, and then here to the switch also. So I left a little space on the side. Could I have put the ground wire on both sides and the capacitor and soldered all three of those at the same time? Yeah, I just didn't want to start pulling out more tools and things like that. So another tool that I use a lot is this bad boy, which has all these awesome hands and claws that I can use to hold things, which is fantastic. I'm guessing a lot of you at home don't have that. And a lot of the reason I'm doing this channel is because I want to show you guys what you can do and what you need to get away with just quality work. And you can still solder things nicely, you just have to take your time. Had I busted out that claw, I would have done all three at the same time. And then we would connect these two at the same time and then these two at the same time. So the one running from here and from here would get connected to there at the same time. The one running from the switch and then also from the bridge volume would get connected to the neck volume all at the same time. So hope that makes sense. If anybody has any questions, by all means, please feel free to just ask away in the comment section. I will do my best to answer them. Again, I'm not an electrical engineer. I can solder pickups and pots. That's about what I'm capable of. So, as I mentioned before, what's going to happen is our pickup is going to come into this lug right here on each of our volumes. Then it's going to come out this middle lug, the second lug, to each side of the switch, coming out the switch through our tone, and then out the tone to our jack, our output jack. So the next biggest thing I really wanted to show you guys before either we keep going with this or if we don't have any questions, we call it, whatever the case ends up being, is soldering a lug. So your first lug, I think technically this is one. Some people call it three, some people call it one. I think it's technically one. Please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that, but I think this is technically one. There's a couple different ways we can solder that on. Now, there's the good old-fashioned way where you literally just bend the lug carefully. You don't want to break that thing off, but now we're almost touching right here. And then what we're going to do, and actually we'll go for the front view on this guy. And I see how we're bent there. We're almost touching, and what we're going to do is we're going to use this opportunity, clean that a little better, to not only create a ground joint right here for our ground wires. But now we're also going to just bring some of that solder right on over to that lug and make sure that we're connected. Now you can see the solder in between there, where we're connected right there. That is probably the most simple and effective way to do a ground solder. That is what you see probably in most guitars. Now, there is another way, and we're going to go ahead and do that on this one. And now we're backwards, so we're still doing this one. It looked like we were doing this one before, but I flipped it around. So instead of bending this guy over, we're going to create our ground point first. We're going to take this here, load it up with solder. Don't breathe it in. And start creating this big old solder circle. All right, nice and shiny, right? Nice and shiny, always nice and shiny. All right, now, the next thing you want is a piece of wire. Now, this wire came off the end of this capacitor here that you can't quite see because this cord's in the way. This piece of wire came right off the end of this capacitor. And you can probably guess what we're going to do by this point. But we're actually just going to stick this right through there. And we're going to end up soldering this directly to that ground joint point that we made right there. And then we're going to just solder the lug on. What we could also do is only solder the lug and leave this joint available for when we need to solder these pots together and the switch together. But I'm showing you guys what we're going to do with straight through, so let's just solder it right on. So I don't have to be touching this because gravity is helping us out right now. And I'm going to hope that this doesn't move. And we'll solder that. And the biggest thing is you want to make sure that the solder, like, see how I can make it sloppy? I guess you can't really see it that well. If we smash it around, we can make this sloppy. You want the nice, shiny, smooth top, not a big sloppy one. And that comes from a steady hand. Like that. So I made this bigger than normal because I was smashing it around to kind of show I should have lifted it up before. But you want it smooth and shiny. Not that big though, again. I smashed it around to kind of show you what not to do. All I did was clean my tip off a little bit right here. I'm going to put the soldering iron on the lug. Then that's going to heat it up. And then I'm going to touch the solder to the lug. Which is then going to solder that one piece in. So now both of these are grounded, whether it's this way, which we can still solder our grounds that are coming from here and here to this spot, or this way. And if you're wondering what do we do with all this extra, you simply cut it off and save that piece for next time, because that would have been long enough for another piece right there, right? So those are two really effective ways to ground your lugs as well, which is necessary. So again, if you're watching this, go to the top down again, please. If you're watching this afterward and you have questions, I am as active as I can be on all my comments as well. So feel free to ask away, ask as many questions as you want, and I will, again, do my absolute best. I'm just trying to look at this with you guys to see if there's anything else I really need to go over. On this particular tone pot, we're not going to solder this guy. This one's technically soldered to the pot just through the capacitor, right? So essentially what we did with the capacitor here is what we did with our ground wire that leftover capacitor wire here. It's the same concept, but now we have a capacitor in the middle. Um, a big thing too is if people put too much of a wire lead through here, it might be touching the jack, especially on the live wire. That's a big no-no. So make sure that you're not pushing your wire through too far where your jack's going to touch extra wire poking through the hole of the lug. That's a big no-no as well. And keep in mind that getting really clean, shiny solder joints is not something that happens just by watching a video on YouTube. This takes a long time to develop. I remember, especially if you're not using like a temperature controlled iron and things like that, it's so tough. And I see guitars easily weekly, almost every day. If I'm doing electronics that day, anytime I'm opening up a customer's guitar, chances are, especially the older it is, the more I'm going to see homemade solder jobs and things like that, where you don't see the shiny joints. Again, this one's big, so I kind of hate it, but it's nice and shiny. That's what it should look like. It just shouldn't be all over here too. So, but you just don't get the shiny stuff. And this looks really bubbled up and big right now, but keep in mind, we're going to be putting two ground wires on that. And when we put our solder and our ground wires on that, that big mound is going to soften. It's going to just go down, and that's going to turn flat like this one did. So, um, again, I think soldering's the thing that a lot of people are really scared of doing. It's really not tough. I think the biggest tip anybody can give when soldering is A, be as safe as possible and do it in a bigger open environment where you don't inhale that smoke. So safety is obviously number one. Number two, don't hold your iron on components for too long because you can burn them out. You can melt the plastic in a lot of these. There is plastic on these. A lot of it's metal, but there is plastic and stuff, and you can even torch some of the metal components and have some bad connectivity from things like that. Do it on face cam. So, um, yeah, I hope that's really helpful. I don't think it really pays to keep going through this. I mean, what you would essentially do is just follow your wiring diagram the rest of the way, right? So I would hook up the switch to these guys. I would run my grounds. And then the next thing I would do is put them in the guitar and then connect the ground and the lead to the volume pots. And we're done. It's as simple as that. So, not a ton to go over other than just like those few tricks and tips. And really, it's just more tips than tricks. This Kester solder is fantastic. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Sumac. Um, if I remember, I'll go back and put an affiliate link for an Amazon purchase in the description below. Um, so this is fantastic. A proper soldering iron. It's going to change your soldering skills the minute you start using good solder and a good iron. If you have any other questions, though, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you got ideas for future videos, please let me know. Again, I'm just kind of thinking of stuff an hour and a half to 2 hours before the stream to make sure, hey, do we have something? What do we want to talk about? If you see below, we also have ways to donate and also to become a Patreon. That would be massive. We're trying to get another one of the cameras that I'm looking into right now for our woodworking room so that we can start like just streaming during the day while we're cutting out headstocks on necks and doing all sorts of cool things like that. So there's actually a neck I have here that I really wanted to cut a headstock out and show you guys how to do that, but I don't have a camera in that room. So anyways, hope all is well. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. If you have questions, please let me know. Otherwise, check out our other videos. We have setup videos and painting videos and finish videos and buffing videos and all sorts of things that are coming out. We have a kit build we're in the process of. We have another kit build that's coming up from a different company that's not StuMac. A lot of exciting things out there. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you get notifications for when we do go live or post new videos, and hope to see you guys soon. Take care. Thank you so much.